Hello, this is Angela with Parkrose Permaculture. I'm sitting in the woodland garden in my Portland, Oregon permaculture system. I was out here the other day and I thought, I really should talk more about the ground cover plants for full shade. So we are at the peak of the afternoon sun here, and you can see there's a little sunlight that gets in here, but for the most part, this is a full shade garden. It is a part of my yard that naturally has a lot of shade. It faces east and north. And so I thought, well, I will just utilize the current conditions that are already here and I will amplify them. And so I planted elders. There are elders above me and behind me that produce a high yield of fruit for me, but this is full shade. So in a permaculture system where we have food forests, where we have woodland gardens, how can we stack in that diversity? How can we amplify the complexity of our systems? Well, in a woodland garden, what you're looking at is needing those low ground cover plants that love full shade and often do well in full dry shade, because dry shade and wet shade are very, very different. So folks often think, well, I'll plunk some ferns in here and that will be my ground cover for shade. A lot of ferns do not like dry shade and won't do well. And when you have big woody trees and shrubs that are soaking up a lot of the groundwater, what you're looking for is plants that do well in dry shade. So let's talk about my 6 favorite ground cover plants for a woodland garden, a deep, mature food forest. Now, some of these plants are native here in the Pacific Northwest and some of them are not. I'm going to skip the big obvious one, which is hostas, which are an edible crop and do well in full shade, but they are pretty well understood. There's loads out there on the internet about hostas, and so I don't want to get into them too much. Know that I do grow them, several kinds. As you can see here, I think they're a lovely plant. They come up fairly late. They come up in late May, and they can struggle in the high heat. And so I don't actually recommend them as a great ground cover for dry shade, and I don't recommend them in a warmer climate, and I don't recommend them for everybody. They can really have a hard time with slug predation early in the year and look pretty bedraggled because the slugs find them quite tasty. So the 6 plants I'm going to talk about today are all fairly low growing, but do know that when some of them flower, they will put up a spire and the flowers will be quite tall. But for most of the year, when these plants are not flowering, I would consider them ground cover. So the first plant on my list, I'll wait for the neighbor's kid to stop screaming. So the first plant on my list is Geranium phaeum, and it's right behind me here. This is what it looks like. It's beautiful. It comes in several different colors, but it's very, very deep purple, the variety that I have. You can get some that are kind of more maroon. It is a full shade loving hardy geranium. If you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I'm a big fan of hardy geraniums for ground cover. Those cranesbill geraniums, I'm not talking about pelargoniums, which Americans for some reason call geraniums, even though they are not geraniums. I'm talking about the true geraniums. There are many that do very well in sun and some that do well in partial shade. Geranium phaeum is one that is perfect for a woodland garden or mature food forest. It loves full shade. It has lovely leaves that do very well, and then these flowers that are kind of upright, very kind of delicate and love to move in the breeze. I love plants that provide a visual interest when the wind blows through them. I think that's an added layer of appeal for your garden in terms of garden design. If you have plants that can be kind of willowy and get kind of not tossed about, but just kind of gently shifted about in the breeze to draw your eye down to them, I think that's a great addition to any garden design. Geranium phaeum, great ground cover. It does spread. It's very easy to divide. I should do a video one of these days on dividing hardy geraniums, because I think they are one of the most satisfactory plants to grow in your garden and propagate yourself. Very easy to propagate, very easy to share with friends, very easy to spread around to form a nice drift in your garden. The second one I want to talk about is the epimediums. I have epimediums around my pawpaw gills. I have epimediums in full shade. There are native epimediums here, and if you look at most of the plant nurseries, epimedium, also called barrenwort, is a plant that has a bazillion cultivars. It's something that hybridizes easily, that the flowers have a tremendous amount of genetic diversity, and the shape and color of the leaves can be really diverse. Again, I love epimediums because they get blown around in the breeze. They form a nice clump with a really attractive looking flower that is somewhat drought tolerant, and an attractive looking foliage that can handle our long period in the summer without rain. I never water my epimediums. They do very, very well. They're again something that can slowly spread and something you can divide on your own. The barrenworts in general like full shade, and the kiss of death for them is going to be putting them in full sun, so be aware of that. Next, I have another native, which is Dicentra formosa. This is a ground cover that won't get you through the whole year, and I plant it in conjunction with many other things, but it is a great spring ground cover. It is the native bleeding heart here in the Pacific Northwest. Dicentra formosa has a delicate, lovely little flower. It will get burnt to a crisp in full sun. So if you grow it, know that it really likes a woodland situation. It likes a north-facing aspect if you can get it. And know that it is somewhat ephemeral, good ground cover for the spring. You will not have it all year long. It will die back. Folks who plant Dicentra formosa sometimes can complain that once you plant it, you have it forever. It's not invasive where I live. It's a native, and I find it unobtrusive and low enough growing that I do not mind that it spreads everywhere. My friend Jenny gave me a little piece of one probably 12 years ago, and it has gently moved itself through the woodland garden, going wherever it feels happy in the shade. And I love that it provides greenery early in the spring, those early spring blossoms, early spring ground cover, before some of my other plants, like my hostas, really get going. Next on the list, we have Symphytum grandiflorum, also known as the creeping comfrey. I have a whole video on this. This is the shade-loving comfrey, low-growing ground cover with little white blossoms. Perfect for a shady garden. Once you plant it, you will never get rid of it. It does spread by rhizomes. It does spread by seed. So if you want to learn more about growing this shade-loving comfrey, please check out my video on that subject, but one of my favorites. Next, we have another Pacific Northwest native, Tellema grandiflora. It's called Fringe Cup. I think that's a lovely name. It is a really nice low-growing ground cover that sends up these spikes of lime green and almost a soft lemon yellow with a greenish tinge. Very delicate flowers that are unassuming but provide visual interest. In fact, you can see it right here next to me, Tellema grandiflora. I really love Fringe Cup. Again, it's a native. Again, it is one that will spread on its own, but not aggressively, and it's very easy to divide and spread it yourself. I love making those organic kind of undulating drifts of plants in my garden. Tellema grandiflora lends itself to that very, very well. Wonderful, wonderful pollinator attractor, and a subtle, again, unobtrusive plant in the landscape that provides excellent ground cover. Last on my list today, but again, there are many other ground covers that I love. These are just 6 that I think do well in full shade. Last is Oxalis oregana. Oxalis oregana is another native, and for me, it is a true low-growing ground cover. It does not get more than 8 inches tall. It has lovely little kind of streaked blossoms with little shots of purple through a white blossom. the underside of the leaves is a deep maroony purple. And so when the wind moves through it, or you walk through an area of the garden that has Oxalis oregana in it, what you get is the underside of the leaves kind of flashing at you, flirting with you a little bit, and you get that dark punch of color, and I find them really visually interesting. Just a great ground cover that will spread itself everywhere, easy to divide and propagate vegetatively. So I hope this video was helpful for you. I hope that you got some inspiration for those 6 ground covers that I prefer for a woodland garden. If you have a mature food forest, if you have a closed canopy, if you have a woodland garden and you are looking for things that can tolerate somewhat dry shade and will do well with no sun, with perhaps maybe a little bit of dappled sun, and provide that role of the ground cover herbaceous plant in your garden, look to these 6 and then see what else you can extend and expand in your garden. I have more than these 6. I'm not going to get into all of them in this video, obviously, but they are a good starting point. Don't feel that you can only use these 6. I talk a lot in my videos about knowing that in our guild design, in our food forest design, that we have so much freedom to experiment. So these 6 are not the end all and be all. They're just a starting place. There may be others that do really well for you. You may find that you want to mix some of these 6 in with your already existing plants. You may find that you can work them into your design and add diversity and get that really lush look and increased food for pollinators, increased beauty in your garden, increased interest, increased reasons for you, the gardener, to be out in the garden. Please check out my Patreon down in the description. That's a great way you can support the work of this channel, and I will be back soon. Thanks.